We have made a lot of videos of various aspects of middle game, end game, and most of it, of course, most of all about the openings. But I had enormous amount of requests of making DVDs to teach people how they can learn how to study and how to improve gradually. Well, obviously, just playing openings correctly is not enough, and just learning certain combinations, tactics, and end games, that's not enough either, because there are other aspects of the game, such as developing plan, finding the right criteria for searching moves, for searching plans. And for that, we have special school that teaches you how to do all that. And there is only one right way to do it. And that's the way I learned, because I was fortunate enough to grow up in Russia, the best country for playing chess, for learning chess. I don't know what else is it best for, but that's about it, maybe. So there is only one correct way to learn chess, and I learned it. I realized that when after I came to United States, and I saw some people, a lot of good players, even good players, they were self-taught. And when you are self-taught, obviously, it's not as you cannot achieve as great of results. And finally, what happens with a good chess player, he becomes better and better and better. He becomes better because he realizes what is missing in his game. And what is missing in his game, those are the components that's supposed to be installed in his chess skill bank in the very, very beginning. And then you progress. If it's done that way, you progress a lot quicker, and eventually you become a lot better player. So we know that what Russian school tells you, you have to develop pieces quickly and castle. But every chess school tells you this. Even if you had to guess by yourself, you can come to this conclusion. But there are a lot more other things. While you develop piece, you have to develop pieces in a proper position. Coordinate those pieces properly. These pieces have to be very active, but that's not enough to be very active, because single piece alone, if it's active, it doesn't do much well. It has also to very well coordinate with your other pieces. For example, when we see some development like this. So I'm just randomly putting pieces out. So then white develops, black develops, white castles, black castles. Okay, now pieces are developed, but you can notice that white's pieces developed much better. And now, how many components do we have here for evaluating this position? There are several. First of all, white has, and I explained it on my previous DVDs, that white has here space advantage. Space advantage means that white has 4.5 ranks. You see, white has up to the center. Well, if you see this rank, fourth rank, and half of the fifth rank. You see, that's half of the fifth rank. So white pieces are better placed. For example, dark square bishop is open to be developed on active position, while black's dark square bishop is not. White's light square bishop developed very well on a good diagonal. Black's dark square bishop, light square bishop does not have any good square to be developed on. For example, d7 is not a great square, e6 is not available, f5 is not available, and g4 square is very temporary. It's good only for one move, because after f3 black's bishop has to go to not so active position. So this is, so both sides did the right thing. They both developed pieces, but developing of one side was a lot more successful. Now, okay, we determined who is better and why. Now, that's far from being enough. Now, what do we do? And what should black supposed to do? It's a simple, clear-cut logic. When you have space advantage, you have to try to gradually advance and make this space advantage grow. And what black's supposed to do? Black's supposed to neutralize white's space advantage. Now, let's get plans for both sides. I will detail the plans. I will tell you what white's supposed to do in concrete details. And then there will be, you will have definite 100% correct plan, but you will have several ways to follow with this. If you gave this position to very strong player, what the strong player will, different strong players will pursue, maybe place differently this position, but they all will be within the plan. I'm just going to explain it to you. What white has to do, obviously, you cannot think about gaining space advantage before the rule number one that everyone knows, and if you don't know it, you are not supposed to be watching this video. You're supposed to conclude development. White's rook is not developed, white's bishop is not developed, the other rook is not good, and queen is not developed. So, first, what we have to do, we have to conclude our development and bring all pieces in the game. And again, let's take one good player, the way he may think he has to do. If anyone would think that let me go now f3, g4, and try to expand on a king side, this is a terrible mistake. This is bad, and this is a wrong plan. But once you know what your wrong plan is, the right plan is, then there are several ways to go with it, and none of them will be mistake. But you have to use criteria, your goals. So I would say bishop f4 will be okay, followed by queen d2, followed by rook d1, followed by rook e1. this is correct way to one of the correct ways to play, and this is within our plan. Well, but that's not the only plan, of course. You don't want to go bishop e3 because give black a tempo with knight g4. The other correct plan, you may play knight takes c6, b takes c, and then play bishop f4, intending to develop the same way. And on top of everything, you may intend to play e5. Now you see, you have to know within within the Russian school of chess there are many different components. One of them is a pawn structure. Now how you integrate all these different kinds of ideas in one game, in one thinking? Well, we know that double pawns are not necessarily always bad. They are bad. For instance, I will show you the position. Those double pawns are not that bad for black, but these double pawns are very bad for black because those double pawns are just isolated. And these double pawns now, they are part of a three-pawn chain. Three-pawn chain. So, okay, so what you're doing, but you cannot play here for pawn structure, neglecting development. No, we are doing knight takes c6, pawn takes, and now bishop f4. So we continue developing and want to get e5 to try to isolate it, black's double pawns. So this is on the list of things that are very good for white. That's another way to play. Now, what is the other way to, are there any other ways to play? Yes. For example, there is knight e2. Now, this move also falls into the general plan, although it's not developing the new piece. Now, why? Why? Because if we talk from black's point, from black's side, we think for black, what black should do here when they don't have, when they have space disadvantage, black supposed to exchange some pieces. And always, that's a general rule. When you have space disadvantage, it's difficult for you to place pieces on good squares because you have limited number of squares. And then you will have to try to exchange some pieces. But that's exactly what white does. White does the opposite to interfere with black's plan. They do this, and then they're going to continue development. This is also right thing to do. One of the plans. So knight e2, bishop f4, or knight takes c6, followed by bishop f4. Those are all logical continuations. But I can assure you that there is no way anyone can find logical continuation without assessing position correctly. So what do I have? What my advantages, what my disadvantages, and based on that you build logical plan. That's the only way chess supposed to be played, only way chess supposed to be learned, and only way chess supposed to be taught. So that's the correct way of thinking. I don't want to go too deep with this position. My goal was to show one of the examples, how pieces are developed. How pieces are developed coordinated and how thinking supposed to go. Now, let me tell you one of the most dangerous ways of thinking in chess. I have met a lot of players of all levels, beginning from, I know, very weak players like next to beginners, and ending to the masters, already masters, rated 2300 even. And it's very, very difficult. The stronger player is within this range I just mentioned, the more difficult for him to change his thinking, because he did not start thinking correctly when he was learning chess. And it's like a child. It's for child, it's easy to learn language when he was almost baby, than to learn when once you are 20 years old. So what was wrong with them? Sometimes they play openings, for example, that have nothing to do with normal chess criteria, how to play game. They play opening like this, and they say that this is good opening. So they put white, black pieces this way, and they say it's very good. Now, I have news for these players. This can be played by super strong players because they know all about strategy and tactics. But when you want to learn chess, that's not the way you play, because you get wrong, absolutely wrong ideas about goals in chess, about the way games should be played, and about your progress. So only very strong player that already went through all this school can play this, because he is not in a mode of learning chess. But guess what? Strong players that know game very well, I couldn't find anyone who was willing to play this position for black. So therefore, that's a bad way to play for many standpoints. Because first of all, you are not going to learn anything about it, about the game. Secondly, you are getting wrong ideas of priorities in the chess and in development. And most importantly, you're just going to have bad position. So this is not the right way of thinking. So chess, the way chess is supposed to be played, in the openings there are, well, let's start with the opening. Every part of the game has some general rules. Well, in the opening, besides developing your pieces quickly, safeguarding your king by castling, there are other ideas, such as confronting your opponent in the center to establish some space for you. So you cannot be, for example, that's why we don't want to play for black like this and being very cramped. This is very bad position, and I'm going to tell you that in the hands of a strong, experienced player for white, it's almost sudden death. So you have to be very competitive in its center. You have to be aware of quick development, and those are like ABCs of what is opening about. But we are not going to go through various different openings, and I'm not going to teach you how to play openings on this DVD. No, we have done that already, and we will do it in the future as well. But this is, I'm trying here to get some people to think, to start thinking correctly, and to be taught chess correctly. I was fortunate. I had great teacher when I was starting playing chess. When I started playing chess, and I had a great teacher, and I thought, wow! And he was so clearly explaining me everything that I just told you myself. And I thought I have the best teacher there is anywhere in the world. Well, only much later, I realized that all he did, and it was a good teacher, of course, but all he did, he followed already very well-known, developing very well-known ideas of how to teach chess developed by Russian chess school. But why Russian chess school was on such a high level comparing to any others? Russians are much smarter than any other nation? Absolutely not. The reason why was because the chess was the #1 activity, maybe in chess, in Russia, and it was put on a very high level of importance by government. So government couldn't entertain people many different ways and give them a lot of pleasure in life some other way. So they developed this great chess school. They hired the highest level professionals, and they put it scientific way. So, and once they endorsed this way of learning chess and teaching chess, it showed results. Well, along with the support of the government, Russian chess players started using this school, and they were a dominant force for many years in the world. And they still are now. And that's what I think is the most important reason for Russian domination in chess from, I don't know, from 1920s to current days. I would say to current days. Well, now let's start talking about different ideas and different important points of Russian chess school. So, at first, of course, you have to learn for very, very beginners. They have to learn mating patterns. They have to learn some tactics. You have to learn combinations. But whether you like it or not, eventually you go through this stage. And there are millions of books that will teach you all different combinations, double attack, pin, and we are not going to go through this. I'm not going to show you all different kinds of combinations because we already went through this. We had DVDs on tactics. But once you have, probably by the time you watch this DVD, you already have some training in tactics. Later on, I will talk to you how to just give you some helpful tips on the calculations. But for now, I have to tell you this, that once you are already through this, through the patterns of combinations, you have tactics, now that's what you have to learn first, because then we're gonna give you some positional tips and some positional basics of positional plays. And positional play and tactical play in any game of chess, they go together because there is no positional way of playing without using some tactics. You have to be using your tactics by yourself or be aware of your opponent's tactics. So this goes together. This is necessary components of the game. So we talk about tactics a little later, but now let's learn some basic positional components. Well, they don't have to be learned in certain order. No, I'm going to give you some randomly chosen, there's some positional aspects of the game that you absolutely have to know, and you have to include them in your arsenal of the weapons when you play the chess game. Well, let's start with one of the openings I have always recommended to play for white. It's a Scotch gambit type of position of two knights defense, knight f6, e5, d5, and realize my goal in this now is not to show you how to play this position, but this opening, but to show you how to capitalize on some positional advantages and why they are so important. Bishop b5, knight e4, knight takes d4, bishop d7, bishop takes c6, pawn takes, castling, bishop c5, f3, knight g5, f4, knight e4, bishop e3, castle, knight d2, knight takes d2, queen takes d2, and on bishop b6, knight b3. Well, here I would like to stop and discuss these positions first without making any moves. White has here significant advantage, and why? Black has double pawns, but that may sound like I'm contradicting to my own statement I just made a little while ago. The double pawns, if there's three pawns and they are not isolated, they are part of a chain, they are not a problem. That's true, but they are not a problem as a weakness, as these pawns will be attacked. No, these pawns will not be attacked and they are fairly safe. But they are problem. They are a problem for black because they create, those double pawns create weak square on c5, which white may easily occupy. That will mean that eventually black will have to give up this bishop for a knight or for a bishop, and then black will have four pawns on queen side that will be totally blocked forever. So these pawns will never be able to move. For instance, let's look at this position. Those pawns, black's queenside pawns, will never be able to move. White's bishop is absolutely dominating comparing to black's bishop. White has control of the big majority of the squares on the board, not to mention weakness on a7, even if black pushes this pawn. This a pawn will always be a weakness because it's isolated, it's all alone, and needs one big piece like a rook or queen to defend it. So black will have a good bishop on f5, but let's compare. This is opposite color bishops. And don't make mistakes. Opposite color bishops, you heard probably the most of the time is a draw. No. Opposite color bishops are very, very dangerous positions in the middle game. And here, even though black has relatively good bishop on f5, white bishop is better. Black has absolutely no plan to improve their position, nor they will ever have in this game. What white will do, white may try to seal the queen side. Actually, this is already sealed enough. Rook f2, and try to slowly make progress. h3, king h2, rook g1, g4. This is all possible because of the total domination of their central area of the board and total blockade. So double pawns, besides being weak or being attacked, they may have another problem. Double pawns may have a problem of creating weak squares, creating outposts for your opponent's pieces. And that's exactly the case we have now. This position is bad. Now, let's go to the original stage of this position. Well, we had something like this, and suppose black plays queen d7. Now we need to put some piece on c5, but we will lose a knight. We cannot do that, so we bring another piece that will help us. It's in general what the plan is. And the reason why we like to put the knight here, because if black takes, it's bad. But if black has to take the piece on c5, what do we rather have on c5? Knight? Well, suppose the position is like this. You want to have knight or a bishop? Of course, we much rather have knight. But why then why we play the knight here and not the bishop? Oh, this is very interesting. I'm going to explain it to you. You have to go knight here and not bishop there, because if you put the bishop there on c5, black does not have to take. Remember, the king is on g1, so black's bishop is pinned. Black can go queen e6 or can go a5 and try to go a4. And we need knight and the queen to stand here to protect the bishop on c5. And that's tying up a lot of material to defending this bishop. Of course, if we knew that black is going to take, we would play bishop c5. But knight c5 is a better move, because bishop, if you end up with a bishop on c5, it's also a weak square, it's also good, and if black doesn't take it, then you can support it with b4, and your queen is practically free to move. You already established blockade. Your queen does not have to stand there, and you can go and you're free for actions on other parts of the board, on other sides of the board, well, on king side in this case. So this is very important. So once you gain control on the c5 square, you absolutely demobilize black's pieces, and you absolutely dominate on the whole board. So let's look at it. In the center, black has absolutely no future. On any f6, there will be bishop d4. On the queen side, well, it's obvious to I can make statement that black has absolutely nothing, and on king side, black has also nothing. So what does white have? After completing the blockade, white has potentials of moving f5, even if black plays bishop f5. The potential is still there. White has space advantage, and white has potentials of developing very powerful attack using all these pieces, possible on the king side. So position, I would say, is lost for black, because sometimes lost does not mean that you're losing a rook or getting mated, or your opponent is queening his pawn in the endgame. No. When you have absolutely no plan, well, if I had to choose to advise someone to how to play this position for black, for example, I would have great difficulties. I would think hard and advise him what to do, but as for now, I have no clue what to advise for black to do, because there is almost nothing for black to do. It's a terrible position. Well, only advice I would give now, see and wait for your opponent's mistakes. And I hate to give this advice. I never do that. So, but I have no other advice to give here. So this is bad position. A good example of dominating on weak squares. So let's take what I just told you. It's very important aspect of a positional game. Now this is principle. It doesn't go for this position. Now let me show you a very different opening. Very different opening. d4, d5, c4, e6. Opening that very frequently played for both sides. Knight f3, c5, c takes d, e takes d. It's a regular Queen's Gambit position. Knight c6, castle, castle, bishop g5, cd. This is all the latest in words of theory in these positions. And suppose black goes bishop g4, rook c1, and rook e8. Well, rook e1. Now let me tell you something. There is a big controversy in many different openings about the value of the pawn. That's the isolated pawn that you can evaluate isolation of this pawn few different ways. Well, more than one way. First of all, this pawn, as may be seen here, is a weakness. Can be attacked, and white has nice outpost on d4 for knight. But on the other hand, this pawn also controls some central squares, e4, e4 square, c4 square, and also black gets gaining some space because of that, and may try to play this position for activity and for attack possibly to develop. This was played by many very strong players and still is. And position is very playable. But one of the strategies white may use in this type of positions is this. Now you see black does not have a weak pawn on d5. d5 pawn is obviously not weak. Suppose black protects the pawn. But what do we have is c5 and d4 squares, outposts for centralized pieces for white. White is going to have centralized pieces. But that's going to be the same blockade as we just seen in the example of two knights defense. But what do we do here? In order to make this blockade very useful and effective, do we put the knight here or bishop here? Of course, knight stands on c5 much better, but I prefer bishop c5 move because of the fact that knight stays on c5 better. I would play bishop c5. I would exchange the square bishops, for example, and then I put my knight on c5 and queen on d4. Then you see black is totally blocked on queen side, and white can slowly gain a lot of pressure on king side. That's the idea of blockade. So blockade is one of the very important aspects of the strategy. Well, you know, once you have this position, now getting there, you're going to have all kinds of tactical solutions here. You may have all kinds of combinations after you go b5, combinations on, you know, on white's rooks on c file. You know, that they can be very active. Also some tactical shots that have to do with the pin. So their tactics may arise a lot later. Same was in two knights defense that I showed you position just before this. Actually, I gotta tell you this, I had those type of positions in tonight defense very frequently, and most of the time on a higher level, when I had them, my opponents will just may resign, and on a lower level they will continue to play, and eventually some tactical shot will decide the game. So this is good example of blockade, and it's very, very important to know them. Important not to get there if you are on black side, well, on the blockaded side, and how you can use it when you are trying to put your opponent in this difficult position. Very often I was told by various players that they like to attack. They like attacking positions. They like to attack always, and no matter what the position is, to play for attack only. That's very, very wrong approach for chess players that try to improve, because attacking your opponent's king position has to be properly prepared by the strategy you chose, by positional play. So attacking has to be very well justified, and if it's not very well justified, most of the time it's disaster. So let me give you few of these examples. Well, let's start with some King's Indian position, Zamish position. Bishop e3, e5, d5. Now, we do have DVD on Zamish defense, Zamish attack, and very frequently we see that black is trying to play f5 here. For example, if black plays knight e8, queen d2, f5, we do play castle, and in case of knight d7, we play e takes f, g takes f, and we go for g4 and h4. Now, this is the kind of attack that is well justified and it's correct to play. Now, I can give you many different examples of when it makes a lot of sense. And then I will give you a lot of examples when it makes some examples that will it makes absolutely no sense. Well, let me give you different example. For example, d4, same Zemish attack. Knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, f3, castle, bishop e3, c5, d5, e6, queen d2, e takes d, e takes d, and suppose black plays knight d7. Now, if we say here that white has a choice to play bishop d3, knight e2, and castling short, or playing castling long and then going h4, g4, and for attack on king side. Castling long and playing for attack on a king side is absolutely wrong thing to do for white here, and it should lead, if black plays correctly, to a total disaster. Because we know, as a general rule, when opponents castled on different sides of board, on queen side and king side, both sides should try the fastest attack possible. Here, black should be a lot faster than white. And why? Black has absolutely powerful bishop on g7 and quick way to open the b file even if it costs a pawn. And in this position, black would play a6, and if white goes h4, trying to go g4, then b5, and black is opening position b file very next move. Now, after g4, trying to go h5, b takes c, and if h5, rook b8, white is in danger. There is attack on a vertical b with the dark square diagonal, and white is in danger. Well, actually, I can point to you that some move like bishop h6, black could have played, instead of rook b8, rook e8. Actually, they could have played rook e8 in early stage to meet bishop h6 with bishop h8. And that will preserve their absolutely dominating bishop on h8. That is very dangerous in the attack on a queen side. However, I have done it too, and I've seen a lot of players done that, good players, rook b8, and on bishop h6, even now you can go bishop h6. This bishop on h8 is so important for black's future attack on a queen side and for their king side defense that rook can be sacrificed for that bishop. And black can retake back with the queen even. And then knight e5, and attack on a b file coordinated with the bishop on h8 may be very, very dangerous. As for white, I don't think white after hg, fg has any attack at all. And black is in a very good shape here. Now, I um, I was playing very frequently one particular variation of Queen's Gambit. And before I played, I saw a lot of games played by very strong players, and I couldn't understand why some of them would castle in this position, why some of them would castle on king side, and some of them would castle on queen side. Well, here is the position, very well known. Position. In this position, black should go rook e8, and that will be actually a normal way to play. Now, I've seen this type of games. Sometimes white castles long, sometimes white castles short, and they both were played by very strong players. And then I realized what is the secret here. In this position, if black plays rook e8, we would want to castle short. The reason for it, why don't we castle long? Why don't we castle long? Because eventually when black simplifies the position, just like this, or black simply goes for king side, for queen side attack, white has to go for king side attack. And it's unclear position, it doesn't favor white as much. Now the point I'm trying to make, in this position frequently black plays h6, but maybe even 4 or 5 moves earlier, and now rook e8. So if we had this position here, it's very, very good for white to castle long. Because after a5, white goes rook g1 and g4 followed by g5. You see, pawn on h6 is very vulnerable. That will help white quickly to open the king side. So when you castle on the opposite sides and you decided to go to the opposite side's attack, it does not depend on your today's mood. It does not depend on what you ate today. It should depend on the type of position. If position tells you, and it's objectively justified, that your attack is gonna be quicker and more successful, you have to do it. Otherwise, it's not right. Some people played anyway, and they may succeed, but credit takes your opponent, so they didn't play correctly. So there should be some criteria and justified evaluation for your aggression. Aggression here has to be done well calculated. And well calculated, you must know that you have a better chance to succeed. Even then, sometimes you fail, but that's the subject to improve. So here, move h6 makes huge difference, because after g4 and g5, position will be opened very, very quick. Well, let me give you another example. Another very good example in a French defense. So you see these ideas once you learn the patterns, and once you learn very well the way you attack and why your attack should be well timed. So you have to know what. Here is the French defense. D takes c, knight takes c4. knight d7, knight f3, knight f6, bishop g5, h6, bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, we go bishop d3. Well, let me give you a little example here. It's very good for black here to castle, for white here to castle long, because h6 is played, and when you go h4 and g4, maybe even g4 sometimes right away, because taking g pawn will be very dangerous. Then move g5, next move will open black's position quickly. So this is your chance of getting strong attack is very, very realistic. And actually there is a well-known theoretical continuation in this case. This is very well known theoretically after e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, d takes e, knight takes e4, and knight d7 and knight f3, and now knight f6, bishop g5. Very frequently c5 is played here. c5, and if black goes bishop d3, maybe cd, I'm going to show you some very interesting example. h6, bishop h4, and bishop e7, bishop takes f6, knight takes f6. But I'm showing you the type of position I was looking at. This is the type of position. Sometimes you use d4 pawn as a shield. So, because in the future, when you take the knight on f6 and go for your attack with h4 and g4, you know, it's good, it's better for you if black has this pawn on d4 than if they didn't, because pawn on d4 kind of blocks dark square bishop and protects your king. So now g4 and g5, along with queen e4 or rook d2 g1, will be very, very dangerous for black. Here black, I think, simply lost. So these attacks are very important. So it's good when you say you want to attack, you don't just push the pawns and go for kingside or queenside attack. You have to have good justification for it. And justifications I just showed you are just some of them. So we see a lot of different attacking patterns. There are some attacks, most of the attacks you prepare, well planned, and do, but there are some attacks, sometimes you attack your opponent's king without any preparation. But that's a part of concrete thinking, and it happens very rarely. So you should disregard that part, because you want to learn everything that is well planned, well justified, and you have to be able to explain it to yourself verbally without moving pieces. Why do you think this attack will be successful? And only then you can go on with it. Well, here is one of the variation, different type of a French. This is something also, one of the variations I recommend to play for white. e5, c5, bishop d2, knight e7, knight b5, bishop takes d2, queen takes d2, castle, castle, knight c6, f4, a6, knight d6, cd, knight f3. Now, this position, our knight on d6 doesn't stand very well. We are much rather have this knight on d4. Knight on d6 does not stand very well because black has easy ways to exchange it. So what did we do that could have been wrong here? Let's go back. Let's go back and let me show you how we supposed to play and how we can justify our future plan, which is attack on your opponent's king in this case. e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, bishop b4, e5, c5, bishop d2, and after knight e7, knight b5, take, take. When black castles, what white has to do in this position, not to castle kingside, but first to make universal move. That move you're gonna need whether you castle kingside or queenside, you have to play f4. The reason why you need f4, you may ask me, well, what happened to the development of pieces in early stage? That's something I was talking to in the beginning of the tape. Well, the reason why we need f4, because we need to develop knight f3 next move. And f4 is necessary move because when black takes the d4 pawn, our e4, e5 pawn has to be well protected, and we have to make sure we withstand any pressure on the e pawn, and we can support it. It's important to maintain the pawn on e5. So what we do before we develop the knight, we go f4. Now your opponent goes knight c6, we go knight f3. Now our e5 pawn cannot be shaken. So, and if your opponent takes on d4, we can take on d4 right now or move later after castling. However, I just told you that knight is better off on d4 than on d6. But sometimes it's not up to you. Your opponent may go a6 here and take cd. You see, now your knight is stuck on d6. You go bishop d3, your opponent goes f6, and you castle here kingside. You have to castle kingside because this is based on concrete variations. You have to put rook on f file quickly because black takes, we take back, and it has a lot to do with the weakness of e5 pawn and e5 pawn that protects the d6 knight. Black has now a couple of various different continuations. Black can play against the e5 weakness. They can do it by playing knight takes e5, and when we just take the knight on d6, or black can play rook takes f3 and then take on e5. In both cases, white must play for very strong attack on the king side. That's what white has to do because black is clearly lacking development. In the case of knight takes e5, we play knight takes e5, and if black plays rook takes f1, followed by rook takes f1 and queen takes d6, black has two extra pawns, but they have no development. King you see we have four pieces: queen, bishop, knight, and rook. They are all well coordinated in king side attack. Black is losing here by force. After queen f4, black is lost. White is threatening queen f7 check. Knight f5 must be played. And now we go g4, knight h6, queen g5. This is the, no, it's very difficult to calculate all the way through, but you have believe. You see, here's what Russian chess school is teaching. They teach that when you have such a great coordination of the pieces against the king and there is very little defense, attack should be successful. Now, there are two cases. If your attack is not successful, there may be two reasons why it has not been successful in these types of positions. So based on the logic and based on the study that teaches us that it has to be successful, you have to win this position. If you didn't win, there must be two reasons. Reason one, you didn't, and most common reason, you didn't perform perfectly. So you missed somewhere easy win. And if you did that, that's the area you have to polish. That's where you may have to make adjustment and improvement. And reason two, it's a very rare case, and it's exception. But exception is so minor that I cannot even take it seriously, and I don't really want to discuss it because I have seen maybe one or two of them in all my life out of hundreds of thousands. So we shouldn't even take it in consideration. In this case, you go queen f4, you're threatening checkmate. Knight f5, g4. Now knight has to move and protect f7 square. Knight h6, and after queen g5, black is totally hopeless and helpless. Rook f6 coming, and rook takes h6. There is absolutely no defense. On bishop d7, rook f6, and rook takes h6 simply wins the game. On king h8, you play rook takes h6, followed by knight f7, and on queen e7, you simply play bishop takes h7, winning the queen next move. If king takes bishop, rook takes h6, and if king h8, then simply knight g6. So this black is losing. But here, this is actually very good way to see why attack should be successful. And this is the way to prove it, that when we have so many overwhelmingly active pieces, we have to be successful. But the other way black can try to take advantage of weak e5 pawn is it's if they played here in this position, if they played rook takes f3, knight is on d6 here, and if they played rook takes f3. But on rook takes f3, one of the possible continuations, and actually it's very interesting continuations. Rook takes, knight takes c5. Very interesting move is queen f4. And after knight takes f3, g takes f. Now here, black's position looks much less dangerous, not nearly as dangerous, but black has 2 extra pawns. Well, this position is about equal. Black has to play knight f5, because on queen f8, queen takes h7, bishop takes h7, and if knight f5, white can play bishop takes f5, e takes f. White has very strong knight. On d6, they may go rook e1. They have good position. Or white may try king h1. This is actually very dangerous move for black, because on move like after queen f6, which looks like more or less a sensible move, knight e8, not almost, it wins the game, because after queen e7, knight takes g7, simply wins. I'm going to just show you quick continuations here. Queen takes knight is obviously bad. So if king takes knight, notice if black doesn't take the knight after knight h5, white is going to have overwhelming position. So, and after king takes g7, rook g1 simply wins black's queen. King h8, black will get mated. And on king f8, they lose a queen after queen check. And on king e8, rook g8 check, followed by rook g7. That wins the queen, and if king goes to f7, then queen h6 also wins the queen. On queen f6, queen takes h7, followed by rook g6, and there is no other way, because on king e8, same rook g8 check, followed by rook g7. Well, this shows why attack is successful. But in both cases, because before we proved that attack was successful, I pointed to you. There is a logical explanation. Explanation is right there. We have overwhelmingly active pieces, but that's not enough. Just to have an active pieces, you have to make sure, in order for your attack be successful, your opponent's pieces must be passive or not as active, and then you have to prevail. If your opponent's pieces are also active, it's okay, but then you don't sacrifice 2 pawns to go for this attack. Here is the case. The reason why we sacrifice 2 pawns, because we are a lot more active and we have coordinated attack on opponent's king. Every attack, you have to be able to justify. Every sacrifice has to be well justified in every position. And that's the only criteria sacrifice has to be based on, besides, of course, the concrete calculations.